Joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Congressman Scott Taylor. He's a Republican, 2nd District, the Virginia Beach Eastern Shore area, goes up through some of the peninsula. Scott, good to have you with us, sir.
Good morning, John. How are you?
Okay, let's start with a tragedy. One of your brethren, a Navy SEAL, deceased earlier this week, the first casualty in the Trump administration. Actually, when I saw it, the picture of him, I'm like, oh my God, that looks just like Scott, unfortunately. So can you shed any insight on what happened?
Well, let's definitely, first say, we out of the less than 1% of the nation's folks that keep going and deploying in these 15 years of war, we have a good portion of them here right in Hampton Roads, and we should always keep them and their strong families in our hearts. They were in Shabwa region, which is a place that I spent a lot of time in Yemen, and there's a lot of Al-Qaeda there, and apparently this was pretty high up on the target list in terms of Al-Qaeda headquarters there, and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and they went in to capture, kill, and get information, and unfortunately they definitely took some fire, and a couple of them were injured. Petty Officer Owens was shot in the leg, and I believe that he bled out on the way out. So it's obviously a tragedy, and we should hold up the family in our prayers. And I'll be heading over to Dover today, actually, with the presidential convoy to pay our respects with the off-ramp ceremony.
All right. Well, look, it's always a sad day when this happens to any person serving overseas. And I know, having been a Navy SEAL yourself, this kind of thing really hits home. So I appreciate it, Congressman Taylor, that you're going to be with that family when the body arrives. I think that's the noble thing to do, sir. Let's get to the Friday ban of these 7 countries by President Trump, basically saying, look, these are the same 7 countries that Obama had on the list. It's no different. Until we can figure this out, I'm not going to let anybody in. They have a history of harboring and exporting terrorists. Meantime, nearly 50 countries with majority Muslim populations not on the list. So obviously this has nothing to do with religion or banning Muslims or anything else. Yet the Democrats have been able to spin this thing. What was your take on this whole matter, sir?
Let me first say, during the campaign, I support a Muslim ban, and in fact, I went to a mosque in Virginia Beach. It was like, I don't support a Muslim ban. For stronger vetting of refugees and immigrants from those war-torn countries, 100%, and that's what this is. And I was just on Christiana Amanpour, and she's this is a Muslim ban, it's a Muslim ban, and I think that's irresponsible journalism. That's activism, not journalism. The text does not say that, and she was basing what she said was a Muslim ban of she's basing that definitive statement of text based on campaign rhetoric, and that is irresponsible journalism. She even asked, isn't this a gift to the jihadis? And I said, actually, what you're doing is a gift to the jihadis. When you're saying definitively this is a Muslim ban, when that's not what the text says. And you mentioned, John, India alone has more Muslims than all 7 of those countries combined. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to spin it. And as you also said, 3 of those states were state sponsors of terrorism, and the other ones had terror-related activities with the heightened warnings, and that was from the Obama administration State Department. So, like I said, I don't support a Muslim ban, but I absolutely support stronger vetting. I can tell you right now, in the Shabwa district, unfortunately, where that incident was, if there's a guy, a Balharth tribesman from the Shabwa district in Yemen, you're not vetting him, and there aren't no records of him in Yemen, for example. Some of those guys don't even know what their birthday is.
Right.
But I think it's important to have, and I saw this line, and it was the best thing I saw about this whole situation was, listen, we lock our doors at night, not because we hate people outside, but because we love people inside. Mm-hmm. And we have a duty to protect people. And I think a pause to figure out, and this administration to figure out if they believe we have secure enough or strong enough vetting, is reasonable and rational.
Congressman Scott Taylor, what is driving the hysteria of your Democratic colleagues in there that they're having press conferences? You got Chuck Schumer in the front of the Supreme Court crying. And I've got in Virginia, there's a press conference yesterday, Don McKeechin, Attorney General Herring, is saying that this is un-American and it's against our values and it cuts to the core of who we are. Is letting people in the United States to chop off our heads, is that who we are?
No, I mean, and we have a duty to protect the nation first, and it's the argument, of course, is that the percentage of that happening is very low. Well, the same thing with people hijacking airplanes, but we have TSA. The same thing with people committing violent crimes. Overall percentage of the population, but we have law enforcement all across the nation because we are a nation of laws, and we want to have security. We should be careful not to impinge on people's liberties, but they're just taking this anything anti-Trump. The Supreme Court nominee who was just announced. He was unanimously voted on by the Senate not too long ago. But I guarantee you there's going to be all kinds of issues. There'll be press conferences and maybe a couple more tears because they just opposed everything in the president's agenda.
The hysteria, I think, is going to backfire on them. We've been talking about this, Congressman Scott Taylor, for 2 days, that it's kind of over the top. There doesn't seem any reason behind it. And look, you got President Trudeau in Canada saying, hey, no problem, I'll take them. Why doesn't, in fact, I had a text here earlier from one of our listeners say, why doesn't Trump just take them up on it and say, fine, you want to take them all? Take them all. Who cares?
I could see him doing that. Honestly, maybe he will do that. Who knows? We have a long history of helping people around the world. We're the most charitable, we're the best nation for that. But we have to be prudent, and we have to understand where people are coming from. I think that's important for security reasons. Absolutely. And this is a temporary ban. It's so crazy. None of these folks were crying or saying anything about a Muslim ban when Barack Obama did so in Iraq for not a Muslim ban, but just a complete ban for 6 months. This is a couple months. It's not even more than that. It's a temporary pause. And I don't blame the administration, whether you agree with them or not, for being a little bit insecure about what they believe the vetting procedures are. Because think about this for a second. In the first few years of the Syrian crisis, the Obama administration didn't do anything on the ground, and quite frankly, they only let in like 20, 30, 40 refugees from the Syria crisis for years, and then all of a sudden it grows exponentially.
Right.
And at a time when the American public, they were apprehensive. They were fearful with this exponential growth in the Syrian refugee program because they saw what was happening in Europe. But the President Obama basically just stuck his finger in our eyes and said, no, we're going to expedite it, we're going to grow it exponentially. And they went from like 30, 40 people to 16,000 coming in there. So, I mean, quite frankly, John, this is one of the reasons why we have a President Trump.
Look, you're exactly right. Congressman, eventually the Trump administration is going to go to Congress proposing about a 20% tariff on imports coming in from Mexico into the United States, which is part of what we call the International Globalist Slave Trade Cheap Labor Network. Is that something you would be able to back?
I have to, and I'm not evading your question, but I have to see it first. I'm not someone who, I like incentives more than I do penalizing people. At the same time, I understand that there are many countries around the world who have border adjustment taxes, which is, we do not have one. I'm with the president on negotiating trade deals. In fact, I have a legislation that's going in now that will require any trade deals to be reviewed biannually with a report to Congress on how it's affecting our country or not, so that we can decide if we want to stay in them or not. But initially, I don't like the idea, John. I like the threat of it because it certainly worked. But I don't like the idea. But I do like the idea of renegotiating NAFTA or doing it on a bilateral as opposed to multilateral basis.
All right, now that you're in Congress and on Capitol Hill, just this past week, once again, the North Koreans rattling their saber, launching another missile. Now that you're there, what is really the level of threat that they pose to us?
Well, for them to do something with a new president is to be expected, right? They test every president.
Right.
There is a level of threat for sure because they have nuclear capability and they have the ability to export that technology as well too. So the unfortunate thing and why we have to prevent Iran from getting nuclear bombs as well too. If you're in that nuclear club and you're like the leader over there, whether you have 5 nuclear bombs or you have 5,000, you have a seat at the table that they have to pay attention to you because you have nuclear weapons. Now, I think the president was actually very smart because he was talking about we're going to pressure China to deal with that problem because, quite frankly, they're the ones that are best equipped to put pressure on the North Koreans. Mm-hmm. So I back that 100%. But I don't think we should be insecure and overreact about the North Koreans. Like I said, they test every single president.
Right.
But I do agree with Trump and pressuring China to deal with them.
All right, looking at the Syrian crisis, President Trump has campaigned on having a safe zone in Syria, a no-fly zone, if you will, in lieu of taking more Syrian refugees into the United States, like we just talked about. Now, that's problematic, obviously, with the Russian Federation, with their presence there. Is that something that you think makes sense, given the state of the affairs right now in Syria?
Not the no-fly zone, the safe zone, yes. I've been on record many times talking about this, and as you know very well, foreign affairs changes almost all the time, depending on what moves great powers are making on the ground. What the scariest thing for me about Syria is the fact that you have Russia, Turkey, us, Israel, and Syria, Iran, Hezbollah, who are all playing in the same space. So there's a lot of potential for flashpoint and much bigger widespread conflict if we don't communicate with them. Now, the safe zones, I went there for my Christmas vacation last Christmas, as you know.
Right.
Yes, I do think that. I think that, resettling one family over here for that kind of cost and trying to make them assimilate to our culture, you can help 50 of them over there. So I do agree with the safe zones there. The fly zone, no-fly zone, I think is much more complicated at this point. Would have been a great thing about 5 years ago under Obama.
Right. But now you feel like I do with the Russian Federation in there. They have warplanes in there. We're playing with fire, right?
For all the talk about, Trump, they're close to Russians. The Russians are the ones with the boots on the ground in Syria. They're the ones with anti-aircraft missiles, very sophisticated ones. They will have a seat at the table because the President Obama allowed them to do that.
Right.
But, they're there. So, yes, we have to deal with them.
In the couple minutes we have, I'm going to stay with foreign policy for a minute. Let's get to our relationship right now with the Turkish government. Do you see any change there with a President Trump coming in?
Well, I see someone who has much better negotiation skills. I hope that he leans on folks that understand Turkish relations and how that relates to the Kurdish populations, how they don't want an independent Kurdish region, how they use their own ties with Islamicists to negotiate with Europe and not allowing people to cross their borders into Europe. It's delicate, but I don't like the government in Turkey has leaned further towards the Islamicists, and they've purged a lot of people who are a little bit more modern. And that worries me. But I think President Trump, being a stronger leader and negotiator than President Obama, will do much better with them because that's they respect and fear strength over there, and that's it. So I hope that he leans on the folks who understand the whole background, the history of it, the subject matter experts, but he uses his strength to be a better negotiator with Turkey than Obama was.
One of your colleagues in Hawaii, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, right, Democrat, that's going to be on our show next week, by the way.
Good.
Yeah, she got a lot, and by the way, she's a veteran, served in Iraq. Tulsi Gabbard got a lot of criticism for going to Syria and then meeting with Assad. As a representative of the United States Congress in her district, does she not have that right?
Well, of course she has the right. I'll tell you, I don't agree with her on all kinds of things, obviously. However, she's the real deal, no doubt about it. And her going over there and meeting with Assad, it's just like we just talked about with Russia. Assad is most likely going to be there. You know what I mean? So nothing is black and white, right? So there's some gray area that he actually protected Christians. He's more modern than a lot of the potential people who would replace him. At the same time, he's also done horrible things to create horrible humanitarian crises in his own country. But we have to deal with the world as it is, not how we wish it to be. And I respect Tulsi for going over there and trying to get a handle on the situation. I actually saw her after that, and I said, "Don't go to Syria without me next time," so I can see what's going on too. She's a great person. She'll do wonderful. Like I said, I don't agree with her on everything, but I definitely have much respect for her.
I think what really troubled me about it was the backlash that she got for having a conversation with President Assad. I think if you're elected to Congress and you're representing your area and you serve on one of these committees, I don't know why you wouldn't want your congressman or woman, your House of Representatives individual to go and talk to anybody. I mean, it's not like she can dictate the policy, but she's trying to learn what's going on from their perspective. I don't see why she got such widespread criticism for that.
Look, I'm someone who likes to get on the ground and see what the hell's going on.
Right.
So I agree with her. I mean, because especially when you look at the media and the news and how it's so different from the actual what's going on the ground. I think it's smart, and I applaud her for doing it. And like I said, if she does it again, I'm going to be mad if she doesn't take me with her.
All right, that's going to be the final word. We're out of time. I want to thank Congressman Scott Taylor for being with us. Scott Taylor is a Republican. He's on the Appropriations Committee. He represents the 2nd Congressional District of Virginia. That's the Virginia Beach Eastern Shore area. Goes up into all the way up into Williamsburg, I believe now. And,
yep, all Williamsburg.
Congressman, great to have you with us, and I look forward to seeing you when I'm up there, and maybe we can do our show one day out of your office when I'm up in the area.
Anytime, John. Thank you for having me, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a great day.
All right, sir. Scott Taylor has been there about a month, and, you can just see from the time we spent on the air, his grasp of international affairs is vast, sober, and deep. And we're honored to have him up there and on our show, certainly.